When you can do the things that I can, but you don't. And then the bad things happen. They happen because of you.
Just like him treating me like a kid all the time.
But you are a kid.
Yeah, a kid who can stop a bus with his bare hands.
Wow, nice catch. 3,000 pounds, 40 miles an hour.
The Stark internship.
What's up, Mr. Stark?
Not a fan of that Tony Stark.
Stay close to the ground.
I'd rather just stay on the ground.
So you want to look out for the little guy.
Build up your game helping the little people.
Somebody's gotta look out for the little guy, right?
Can't you just be a friendly
Friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
neighborhood Spider-Man?
I can already tell that I'm going to get some hate for this video. I can see the comments now. You're just a Raimi shill. Or, you just really don't like the MCU. That is just not true. I do actually like the MCU quite a bit. I wouldn't exactly call myself a Raimi shill per se, but I will say that I do prefer those Spider-Man films over either of the MCU entries for the wall crawler in pretty much every conceivable way. I did, however, enjoy Spider-Man Homecoming. Not so much as a Spider-Man film, but as a coming-of-age high school comedy set inside the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Michael Keaton as the Vulture is by far the bright spot throughout the film, and yes, Tom Holland perfectly fits as a shy, dorky high school student, but if you ask me, that is a far cry from the version of Spider-Man that I have come to know and love over the years. All that being said, I have yet to be sold on this adaptation of the webhead. Tom Holland's take on the character is so far removed from the Spider-Man / Peter Parker that I have come to love from the comics, TV series, previous films, and even the video games. Not only did I rewatch Homecoming and Far From Home before writing this video, but I also rewatched Peter's introduction into the MCU way back at Captain America Civil War. If I'm being 100% honest here, and I like to think that I am, I liked his character in Civil War so much more than in either of his two solo outings. Part of me almost wishes that the Russo brothers were behind those two films instead of Watts and Company. Okay, so that's enough of that. I totally meant for the opening of this video to make you all hate me a little bit less. I've attempted to write and rewrite this script so many times over the past 3 to 4 months, I was never happy with any of the outcomes. I don't think I was in the right state of mind, but I've taken some time to reflect and work on other projects in the meantime, and I think I was finally able to put all of my thoughts on this version of a character that I love so much and I have so much appreciation for into words on a page. Enough of that sappy bullshit. MCU Spider-Man sucks, Tobey Maguire is a god among men, and Sam Raimi is our Lord and Savior. Sorry, did I take things a bit too far? Maybe. Alright, let's tone it down a bit and get right into how I actually feel about the MCU's version of the webhead. One of the biggest defining traits of Spider-Man across so many different depictions of the character across all types of media is the fact that he could never seem to catch a break in any aspect of either of his lives. People like to point to Spider-Man 2 as the prime example, and it really is. A good portion of the runtime in that film is spent just tearing Peter down. He's always late to class and is at risk of flunking out. He can't keep up on his rent because it's impossible for him to hold down a steady job. He can't keep up with his social commitments, whether it's going to see Mary Jane in her new play, or just bothering to return his best friend's phone calls. Now, to quickly touch on the subject of money when it comes to Spider-Man, in Far From Home, they had scenes filmed showing Peter trying to sell his Star Wars collection so that he could afford to pay for his school trip. They cut it out. Let me clarify a bit. They cut it out of the final edit of the film so that they could use it as a special feature on the Blu-ray. I will cut to a clip of my fellow YouTuber Chris Reagan for a response to that. Just one small thing like that in either of these two films would make me appreciate them so much more, but they really seem like they want to steer away from any sort of real life struggle for Peter Parker. Any sort of aspect that might actually make me feel connected to this character is just taken away. Why is it so hard for them to get something so simple right? Sam Raimi was able to do it, and for as much hate as they get, Mark Webb was able to as well with the Amazing Spider-Man duology. Hell, Into the Spider-Verse absolutely nailed the relatable aspect of Spider-Man. They really drove home the whole anyone can be behind the mask mantra that film brings up, and that is why I love that movie as much as I do. Okay, that was supposed to just be a quick side note about money and Spider-Man, but it turned into a completely separate rant. Back to the main topic at hand. What is the one underlying reason that connects all of those issues? Spider-Man. Take a look at Insomniac's brilliant game from 2018. The game begins with Peter having to make a choice to either pay his bills or go take down Kingpin, who he has been after for years. Of course, since he's the hero, he chooses to go after after the bad guy. To follow that minor detail up at the beginning of the game, later on in the story, you play a mission where Peter gets evicted from his apartment and you have to go searching through garbage trucks just to find your stuff. To top it all off, the mission ends with Peter sleeping in May's office on the couch at Feast. That right there is peak Spider-Man to me. Now you can throw in as many references to the Avengers as you want, but it won't make the MCU version of Spider-Man a good version of that character. This next point that I want to bring up has been beaten to death by so many people in the film sphere on YouTube and Twitter, but I really need to talk about it. Tony Stark is not a good replacement for Uncle Ben. In Civil War, Peter vaguely references what happened to Ben when he's talking to Tony in his bedroom. Aside from that and a slight Easter egg of Ben's initials being on the suitcase Peter takes to Europe and Far From Home, they never mentioned him by name, not even once. I can totally get behind not wanting to show his death scene for a third time on the big screen, and if I'm being honest, I kind of agree with the decision not to include that, but to not even mention the single biggest influence on Peter's life and his driving force behind becoming Spider-Man is completely unforgivable. Everybody already knows Spider-Man's origin story, so skipping that portion of his introduction isn't a bad idea at all. To bring it back to the PS4 game again, which if you ask me is probably my favorite version of the character outside of the comics, the story picks up years after Peter gains his powers. He is in his early 20s, he's finished with college and well into his crime-fighting career. That is the way to tell a Spider-Man story without his origin and still make it true to the character. Anyway, Disney took things a bit too far by completely altering the character's past. They removed this core theme that both Maguire and Garfield had: adversity. 2002's Spider-Man and its 2004 sequel are both excellent cases in which the films nail the theme of the character. In the first entry of Sam Raimi's fantastic trilogy, video coming soon by the way, we see Peter wrestle with the temptation of using his powers for monetary gain and the overwhelming guilt to save the people he loves the most. Spider-Man 2, the best Spider-Man film hands down, sees him eventually rise above inadequacy both physically and emotionally to truly become the hero he was meant to be. Both films had stakes, both films had consequences, both films managed to tackle nuanced issues and complex characters while still having moments of laughter that did not halt the flow of the film for a cheap laugh. Peter tends to use humor to hide his pain. In many ways, it's
It's a defense mechanism.
Andrew Garfield's run in the Mark Webb-directed The Amazing Spider-Man understood the tension between hardship and humor. Peter isn't just this carefree kid with superpowers screwing around and showing off. This guy has been through some shit. There's a specific scene in The Amazing Spider-Man that I feel I need to mention. Flash Thompson, his high school bully, approaches him in the hallway in an attempt to offer his condolences for the loss of Uncle Ben, and Peter just loses it. He grabs Flash by the collar of his shirt and raises him above the lockers. He is completely full of rage, grief, and guilt, and he is just looking to take it out on someone that he feels deserves it. After a quick pause, he comes to his senses and leaves with tears in his eyes. That is the kind of pathos that you want to see in Spider-Man. That being said, he wasn't dark and brooding in either of the two Mark Webb films. Garfield's take on the character is actually quite funny, but the film knew when to tone down the comedy and develop the character even further. As jam-packed and all over the place the second installment was, it still gave us some very strong character development. It also managed to hit everyone in the heart by including the death of Gwen Stacy. Now let's be honest with ourselves here. MCU Spidey hasn't exactly faced very much adversity in his time on the screen, aside from the whole
Stark? I don't feel so good. I don't know what's happening. I don't know. I don't want to go. I don't want to go. Sir, please go. I don't want to go.
He has a fairly normal upper-middle-class upbringing with a much younger Aunt May. The death of Uncle Ben doesn't seem to have really affected him at all. I mean, hell, the one item he had to remember the most influential character in his life, Ben's suitcase, is destroyed somewhere off-screen during the final battle in Far From Home, and it just gets played off for a joke at the end of the film. He has a very wealthy benefactor in Tony Stark to not only fund his superhero exploits, but to also design and build his suits. Now, yes, I know Tony Stark is dead and Peter will have to fend for himself now, which I am actually very interested to see how they handle it moving forward. He did design his own suit in Far From Home, but he was using Stark's tech and resources, and he even fell back on calling Happy in for help after his encounter with Mysterio. His high school bully is an equally nerdy rich kid that I have no doubt Peter could knock out with one punch, superpowers or not. I guess you could say he kinda has girl problems, maybe? Even then though, his struggle to get the girl, and I use air quotes, in Far From Home is nothing when compared to what previous incarnations had to go through. For God's sake, he ends up with MJ at the end anyway. One last thing I need to touch on is the fact that just about everybody Peter knows finds out he's Spider-Man between these two films. Ned, his best friend, is there to see him in the suit in the beginning of Homecoming, and that film ends with May catching him in his room with the suit on. Fast forward to Far From Home, and MJ just knows, I guess? Out of nowhere, she just knows. Not to mention the fact that the post-credit scene shows a clip of Mysterio revealing his true identity to everyone. That one scene, while it did give us the much welcome return of J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson, it completely removed any possibility for a struggle to keep his identity a secret in any future films. There's no real loss or trial here. He does lose his suit when Tony takes it away in Homecoming and is forced to use his homemade suit without all the Stark tech in it, and if I'm being honest, that was the best portion of Homecoming. But of course, at the end of the film, he gets the suit back. Nothing lost, nothing learned, no real issues. It's just hard for me to relate to his struggles as Spider-Man or Peter Parker when they seem so sanitized. It's almost as if Disney doesn't think that he can handle any real-life problems. Throughout Spider-Man Homecoming, I was begging for the film to show me something real, something poignant, something moving that would prove me wrong. But it never came. The main theme throughout Into the Spider-Verse is that anybody can be behind the mask. That's always been my main draw to the character. I could see myself in Peter Parker. I could be Spider-Man. That just all went right out the goddamn window with this take on my favorite superhero, and that is probably my biggest disappointment with either of these films. I will never say that I hate Homecoming or Far From Home because that just wouldn't be true. I don't hate them. I can find things that I like about them. Like I said, I like a lot of Homecoming. Michael Keaton is the best part. The scene in the car on the way to Homecoming is by far my favorite scene in that movie. As for Far From Home, there's fewer things I like about it, but Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio is a standout. J.K. Simmons coming back is fantastic. The Mysterio fight scenes were just beautiful. But like I said, I do enjoy them for what they are. Quirky, coming-of-age, high school comedies. But I will say that so far, the Spider-Man that we have gotten in the MCU has been, if I can take a note from the man himself, High Top Films, heartbreaking. Okay, thank you all for watching this video. This one has been in the works for a while. I have been writing and rewriting this video for about 3 or 4 months, and I finally settled on a script that I'm happy with. Just know the editing process is probably going to take longer than it did for me to write the video. I want to be as thorough as I can with this. I do have some other stuff coming up. I have my Phase 1 video for the MCU still working, still shooting for hopefully the beginning of July. I may need to push it back a week, but that being said, I've been streaming on Twitch a lot more often. Link will be right down below. Follow me on Twitter as well. Thank you again for watching. See you guys next time.